taking time for yourself in the morning, whatever that looks like. Like, I think a lot of times we just start our days and we keep going, right? You wake up with this jarring alarm and then you're like, okay, let me go shower. Okay, let me do, X, Y, and Z. And you're not actually taking the time to slow down and to say, okay, what do I even want this day to look like? What am I feeling right now? What am I like? What does my body feel like?
Hey everyone, welcome back. We are here with the First Gems podcast. I am your lovely host for today, ATL Anna, and I'm joined with the Gems as usual. And y'all, I'm so excited to get into this conversation. We have a very special guest with us, the one and only Dr. Uche Ukuku in the building. Make some noise. Can always count on Clara with the sound effects. I see you, girl. Yes, y'all heard it here first. We have Dr. Uche Ukuku in the building with us, a psychologist, mental health and trauma specialist, and our fellow sister from Aberba. Thank you so much for being here, girl.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to get into the convo today. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And, we wanted to talk all things mental health and awareness for Mental Health Awareness Month. And, we've had a number of conversations about health and wellness, but we were like, let's bring in the big guns. Let's bring in the professionals. We have our fellow sister from the community that we could pull in and have this beautiful conversation. So super excited to have you here. If y'all didn't know already, Dr. Uche Ukuku, y'all go ahead and Google her, please, to learn more. But she is the co-founder of Talk Naija Therapy Fund and as well as the ADA group. So she's representing for the first daughters out here who are looking for all things health and wellness. So it was a no-brainer to bring you to the First Gems to share these gems, girl, because we still need them.
Yeah, I love all things mental health and Nigerian. So, yep, works out.
Perfect. So, yeah. Okay. So for those that don't know about you, Dr. Uche, how would you introduce yourself to folks who are interested in your career?
Yeah, so my name again is Dr. Uche Ukuku. I am a licensed psychologist in Philadelphia area. I specialize in the treatment of trauma, just because I think that how we talk about trauma in our society is not really redemptive or restorative. It's kind of like this happened to you, get over it, or it happened to you and it's your identity. And so, like, a lot of my work with people is to help them to not only unpack and understand and be able to move through and decide, like, okay, where do I want to place these events that have happened in my life, right? So a lot of times, sometimes it can feel like it has held me back or it predicts my future, and then helping people to kind of move from that. But I would also say, like, I am very passionate about for like first gen people coming to therapy, immigrants coming to therapy, Nigerians coming to therapy, because we also know it's very taboo still. Even when I decided I want to be a psychologist, my parents were like, why? Like, they didn't understand. My dad thought I was going to be poor. And so it was just really getting them to this place where it's like, no, you know what, therapy makes sense. Mental health is real. And they've come along in the journey. And now, like, they tell people about what I do and things like that. And then also being able to create Talk Naija with a couple of my co-founders to just promote mental health and wellness and destigmatize mental health and therapy in the Nigerian community. And then doing things like providing people resources to go to therapy and stuff like that. So kind of a whirlwind mix of things.
Beautiful. And, we always say we all need therapy, right? And we all need to get these resources and support that we need because we want to be better for ourselves and for each other. And so I think it's so important, like the work that you're doing in a particular, that first gen perspective. And again, it's a no-brainer for you to come here and talk to us and our audiences who can definitely relate and hopefully, see the importance of the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Yeah. I love that that's your niche and focus, because I feel like as first gens in our heads, we're like, oh my gosh, our parents need therapy, but it's not something that's like a practice or like something that's normal for us to see. So I just love that that's your focus and that's what you're passionate about. And I know you're helping so many families, so many first gens. What was that defining moment for you when you realized that this was a need that needed to be filled and you were going to be the person to break the stigma?
Yeah, so, like, I think I always knew I wanted to be a psychologist since literally I was in 6th grade. I went overboard with this project, and I got all this research and did all these things. I was like, "Oh, okay, this is kinda nerdy," but I really enjoyed it. And then I worked at a summer camp, for at-risk youth, the summer before my senior year in college, and that was where I really got the introduction of, like, okay, what does it look like for people who've gone through trauma? And then for a lot of times, people just forget about them, and it's just like, "Okay, well, it is what it is," and kind of think they're gonna go on a certain path, and so that kind of like started to have like set the seed for me. But then when I got to grad school, and I was the only Black person in my class, I was at a small cohort, only Black person in a program, and really starting to be like, okay, this is very different than what we're talking about a lot of times, westernized therapy or mental health, and a lot of things are so much normed on people who don't look like us.
Mm.
To getting to this place where when I started to do research, I was like, I want to research about Nigerians. I want to research about what are our attitudes about like mental health and how to do that. But then I also had a friend go through a really tough time when I was in grad school. And I just remember her mom talking about like when I was like, yeah, we got her these resources for therapy. And she was like, that's the white man's thing. And why would you do that? Because they were also Nigerian. And it was like, getting on the phone and talking to her about like, no, it's not the white man's thing. This is actually something that can be really healthy and helpful. But it really just made me think of like, wow, there's just so much stigma. And if we even know just like from being Nigerian, but then also from being Igbo, like you think about the Biafran War and
Mhm.
like all of our parents are children of Biafra in that sense. And we're extended and there's so much trauma with that. And we just are like, just go and get degrees and move on with your life and really getting to that place where it's like all these degrees are not really going to change if you are depressed.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. Like doing the mental work and mental healing is so important to your progression. I'm one of those people where I always say that I want to sign up for therapy. I think I even mentioned it in another episode. I was like, "Oh yeah, it's my goal to sign up for therapy this year," but I never do it, you know? And I think
Mhm.
that's the type of like burden that we place on ourselves, not even just being first gen, but just being Black people,
Mhm.
where we're just kind of like, oh, we can deal with it, or it's not that serious. We're not really taught to kind of make a grand moment out of the things that we're experiencing. And
Mhm.
I know that's like heavily within the Black American culture as well. So what are some things that you notice that are specific to first gen experiences when it comes to um, just addressing trauma and just mental health issues?
I think there's a lot of like identity things that come up, right? So when you are born, whether for some people they call it, like third culture kids, where they're like, moving from place to place, or just that you are bicultural. And so you're growing up in the American, atmosphere, but really, you got a Nigerian household at home, right? Like I don't know, for myself, it was very much like, okay, the outside world was America, but like inside our house was like we were in Aperba, like there was no, we're not speaking English, we're
Mhm.
not doing this and this. So I think that like there's a struggle there of like, normalizing sometimes certain things that actually aren't normal. And I think that's something that I see a lot with like when people come into therapy and they've normalized some things that we just call it like culture. And we're like, I don't know if that's necessarily like culture. Is that necessarily like things that we've just kind of accepted in certain
Yeah.
ways? And so I think with like first gen people, it's thinking about like one, you have to say like, okay, I have to unpack like, was this okay? Even if it was normalized, that doesn't necessarily mean that it was healthy that was going on. And then also being able to say like, okay, I might have this idea of what like healing looks like, or you're hearing all this messaging from like your parents of like, keep everything in the family and that you don't tell anybody else, and we'll deal with it, we'll deal with it. But it's like, but if you're the issue, how am I going to really, unpack that with you, right? Like I probably need an outside person to help me. And so I see like there's a sense of like loyalty, I think too,
Mhm.
that a lot of first gens have, where you feel like you're almost being disloyal to say, hey, this experience was traumatic, or maybe there was some abuse that was happening there too, because there's also this, but you sacrificed and you made this life for me. And
Yeah.
so people are very much in this like back and forth of like, can I be completely honest with my experience if I also know that my parents were struggling
Yeah.
too?
Wow. Wow, that's real. That's real. Do you ever let's say you have a client who's first gen, and they express to their parents they're going through therapy, etc. Do you ever counsel the parents too, or you specifically focus within like um just the first gen?
So I specifically focus with the client, but there are times where I've had with clients where we talk about, okay, are there things that you want to share with your parents? And then we will prep around it. And then I'll have their parent come to session, right? The next time. And then they're able to say like, okay, this is what it is, and explain whatever the situation is. Cause I've seen that that's also been helpful for some people too, where it's just like, okay, I really do want to do this, but I kind of feel afraid. Like, I don't want to do it by myself. I want some support. But then people and their parents actually get to see like, oh, this is what therapy is, right? Like, and it's a very different experience than a lot of times what they're probably thinking it's about to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're like, we don't want to tell our family secrets to some stranger.
Right, exactly. But the funniest part is like once they start talking, they keep going. And I'm like, are you sure you don't really like this? I think you do.
Exactly. No,
Well, it's
even with
probably because you create a space for them to feel like
yeah,
vulnerable and like open to actually share
yeah,
those secrets and, things
yeah,
that they've been harboring.
Yes,
yeah,
definitely. Yeah. Yeah. Having that space and having it feel like, because I think too, sometimes, when you're such an insular like community, it can feel like, well, if I tell this person, then 19,000 other people are going to know. And like getting people to know, like, no, like I take confidentiality very, very seriously. One, it's my license. And then two, also just like my own beliefs that everyone doesn't have to know everything. But once they feel safe, it's like, oh, okay, I actually can, communicate. I can let my guard down.
Absolutely.
yeah. Even with us starting this podcast, I remember my dad was like, "Don't go telling things about our family and things like that." I'm like, "It's just a podcast." I'm like, yeah. So it's
Mhm.
very there. That's really like a thing of don't go telling X, Y, and Z, ABC anything. And I can imagine that's even greater when it comes to therapy. So with that, if there was one thing, if you could just snap a finger, wave a wand, something, and you could change one aspect of just the mental health stigma in Nigerian and African communities, like what would that be?
That it's not for white people.
Mm.
I think that like when I was doing my dissertation, I was asking my mom about, so I did it on depression stigma in Nigerians, and I specifically looked at how religiosity, beliefs in causation, and spirituality impact people's belief in depression, and then how they treat people when they have depression too. And so when I was like doing my like research, like it was like one of these things where one, there's not a bunch of research. So it was like, oh dang, like I don't really have much to pull from, but it helps in some ways. But then I was also talking to my mom, and my mom was telling us about how there was this thing like back in Abuja that they used to do to like settle conflicts. And I think it was called Ikuku. And so basically there would be like this one time, I think it'd be like at the end of harvest season or something like that, where if you had beef with someone, you would basically be like, okay, I got beef with Anna. All right, everybody come to the square, right? And then everyone comes out to the square, and then you have to settle that beef that day, right? So like whatever you do to settle that beef, you settle that beef, and then you're like, all right, done, right? And so what it was saying was that like after we pulled and the community has seen that we came together, we solved it, and then you squash that beef from that day. And my mom was like, that was a part of some of like our celebrations and stuff like that. But when the white man came, he started to say like, oh, why are you guys doing this? What is this? What is this? What is this? And so we ended up losing out like a lot of our ways of even conflict resolution or different things that we used to do that, are extensions of like what therapy looks like, right? So therapy doesn't always have to look like the westernized concept of it, but that therapy was happening in different ways in like a lot of our communities. And so I always think about that when mom was telling me that, because I'm like, wow, there's like ways for us to be able to marry like Western concepts with like traditional concepts and say like, hey, this is what like healing looks like for us. But I think because they did such a good job kind of like brainwashing and stealing so much of our culture and making us think like things were bad, that then we're like, we almost throw healing in certain ways in that too. And it's like, oh, that's the white man's thing. So like, we don't have to like think about how we feel or what we're thinking about. And so I feel like if we were able to actually, dismantle that belief like in that system and have people kind of feel like they can be more open, I think it would be so much healthier.
I'll tell you one thing, we need that practice to come back in the community. And not just the community,
Yeah.
but just a lot of people need to adopt that, myself included. Man. So Uche, there's so many things to get into. And I love this. So when you were talking about our communities and like our approach towards healing, I also see like how we should really adopt that mindset to focus on healing and using that as a way to redefine what it means to be strong, like as a community. So I'm also thinking though, with a lot of the, I guess, paradoxes that exist with our communities, with our parents, with just our culture, a lot of the ideas of like strength and what that means is like misunderstood in the context of like seeking support for mental health. So, how do you help your clients sort of redefine what that means to be strong while still taking the necessary actions to seek resources when needed?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Like, I think about strength in a lot of different ways because I also put it like with the word like victim, like people hate to refer themselves as victim, hear the word victim. And we kind of think of that like as weakness too. But not knowing that like sometimes to even say you are a victim can actually be freeing because that would mean to admit that something harm like came to me that I did not want, right? And like it did impact me and it did change me. And I was victimized in that sense. But I think a lot of times, especially like with Black people, especially with Black women, right? We're not seen as like victims. We're not seen as like we can be harmed. And then sometimes I think we kind of put on then that armor of like, well, I'm strong and I can get through anything and it doesn't really matter. But when we put on that armor, it doesn't allow us to actually think about what has this experience been like for us? How has it changed us? How has it impacted us? And so like with clients, I really have them to kind of like start to think about like, one, why is strength so important? Like, why do you put that on such a high pedestal that it's like the most important thing I have to be? And then are there times where it's like being super strong is actually like maladaptive, actually harmful to you, right? Like, and sometimes we become strong because it was adaptive in that specific situation, right? Like I needed to, endure this, or I needed to make sure I woke up the next day so I was strong. But now I'm not in a place of like conflict, but then I'm still carrying on like that same type of mentality. I'm still like putting myself say like, I got to be super strong. And I think sometimes then we miss out on like connection and intimacy and community when we are so strong because then that strength starts to lean into like super independent and it's like, I don't really need this. I can just do it by myself. And then you end up disconnecting from what you really want, which is community.
That's true. Like it's like to a point where you're trying to appear to be too strong, but then you're kind of not having any sort of feelings or projecting that to other people to allow them to like be able to connect with you. And again, just keeping myself in this as well because I'm hearing in ways that like previously and even now that I continue to sort of like my brain's on autopilot to be like, oh, this adversity came to me. Let me be stoic. Let me show strength. When like really I should be focusing on like the vulnerable aspects of me to say, where do I need some connection? Where do I need to like reset? Where do I need to recharge if necessary? So definitely hear that and including myself in that. And on that note too, Dr. Uche, I know that the ADA group is something that's near and dear to you. So I want to hear about how that came to be, but also, anyways, how that came to be. And then I'll get to the second half of the question that's related to being an ADA, which is a first daughter for those who don't know.
Yeah, so the ADAT group really came about because I was seeing a lot of first daughters in individual therapy, like a lot. And they were coming in with a lot of the similar problems. So a lot of anxiety, a lot of like hyper independence, a lot of like guilt, a lot of difficulty in like not or abandoning like the role of I have to be the mom, I have to take care of things, and like how that then was like interrupting some of their relationships and stuff like that. And I was just like, this is like kind of a common theme. But then also that there's such an isolation that comes along with that too, because you're then the only one in the family experiencing this thing here. And so from there, I started thinking more about like even thinking about, okay, my own sister who's an ADA and like the things that she's experienced. And I actually crazy enough, a lot of my friends are first daughters. And I was like, I don't know how I collected all of y'all and y'all are all here. And so like, I'm like, there are a lot of similar things that I'm seeing here. And so honestly, it like kind of came together in that way where I was like, you know what? I think one, it needs to be in a group format so people can feel like they're not alone. But then also so you can see like somebody where it's like, oh, you have a similar experience. How are you dealing with it? But then also I don't have to like have all the answers and I can learn from other people and I can feel a sense of like community in that way. And so for me, like just thinking about how I was just seeing it play out in so many different areas of my life, I was like, this might be worthwhile.
Yeah. And it has been for sure, because a lot of those resources are just too similar to ignore. And we've talked so many times. I feel like each of our episodes that we've produced that have like the aspect of like what it means to be a first daughter, how we've seen the world growing up, it's just so relatable. And it's not just what we've learned so far is that it's not just synonymous to being Nigerian. Like being a first daughter has those similar traits across like every culture, I'll say. So the second half of that question was, what advice do you give to people like us who tend to feel guilty or selfish when it comes to prioritizing our mental health needs?
Yeah. So I think about it as like it is a worth thing too, like a worth question, right? So sometimes if you don't feel as though you're worthy, or that your worth comes from what you produce, it's like, okay, well, then I can take care of myself if I show that I've done all these 15 things, right? But I believe that people are worthy just because they were born, that there's no act you can do, there's nothing, no relationship you have to have that's going to create worthiness in you, but it's the fact that you were born, which makes you worthy. And so if I was born, that makes me worthy. What does it look like for me to see or show that that is actually what I believe, right? And so that would mean that I have to take care of myself mentally, physically, spiritually, community wise, like relationally. So then it's like, okay, it actually reflects what I keep saying to myself, that I'm worthy.
I feel like you're just holding my hand as we're talking. This feels like a session. Like, don't y'all feel the same?
No, it does. I was
Yeah.
like so deep. Like, oh, I love your perspective on worthiness and just being born with it. Like, that's such a beautiful way to look at it, and such a grounding um mental practice to kind of come back to in those times where you're feeling like less than, or you have the tendency of putting others before yourself and things like that. Yeah, I love it.
Absolutely. Feels like affirmations too. Like, I am
Yeah.
worthy.
But it really is. And then that's like what you have to tell yourself. I don't know. Because I think we are such in a society where everything is measured. Like we talk about the words high value and da 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 da, and like we're tagging things to people and saying like, now that I see you like this, you deserve X, right? Instead of like, no, I deserve, or I just need love, right? Or I need care, I need blah blah blah. But I don't have to earn it. And I feel like we live in such a society that we're like always talking about like you have to earn everything.
Dr. Uche, it's no wonder at this point that you have since opened your own practice and are helping countless amount of people through your intelligent insights. And so one thing that's really cool to know is that you started your practice during the pandemic. So also curious to know what were some of those like rewarding, but also like the toughest parts of building your, the space that you provide for folks.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy because I started it like January. I opened my office like January. And then I was like transitioning from working at a group practice, and I was still like at the nonprofit doing work there. But I was like, okay, I'm gonna leave the group practice, do my own practice. And it was literally my last day at the group practice was the first day of the shutdown. And I was like, this is different. Like, okay, God, you told me to walk out. So I'm gonna keep going. And so it was very like, I don't know. It was something that was just interesting because it was like, okay, we're going through this like unprecedented thing that none of us have ever even thought could be like imagined. But then it was like crazy in a way of it was actually forcing people to face their mental health, right? Because if I don't have the distractions that I used to have, like I go to movies, I'm gonna go to a club, I'm gonna party with my friends, I'm gonna do all this other stuff, and all that's shut down, like it's just me and my thoughts. And so I think that really like accelerated a lot of people into therapy, where they were like, you know what, like this is not okay for me. I can't do this. I can't be in the house all the time. A lot of times with some people's relationships, a lot of relationships ended because they were like, oh, we really don't really know each other maybe that well. We're really not that compatible in that sense. But I think a lot of that also came because people started to doing a lot of like inner work. And so for me, during that time, it was thinking of like, okay, the shutdown's happening. I just opened this practice. Like, what in the world am I going to do? But then being able to like just start to see people, and it was like word of mouth, and people were finding me like on pages and stuff like that. And so they were just coming into therapy, and just my practice was like building, building, building. And it really got built extremely fast, like way faster than what they tell you. They're like, oh, it's going to take this amount of time. And like, I think I was full by like that May, and I like opened for real like that March. And so it was just like, wow, this is kind of wild. But I feel like it just was really saying like, oh, you are walking in like the purpose that you have right now. And being able to do that, and then being able to then for myself on the other side of it, that was the first time I went to therapy, was actually in 2020. And it was like so strange, where it's like, I've been a psychologist, I've been doing therapy for so many years. And then it was finally like, oh girl, you need to go to therapy too, because this is getting crazy. And so it was like a very interesting experience, and being in therapy myself, giving therapy, going through a pandemic, building my practice. Like, it was like so many things that were happening at the same time. But I think like there was a reason for them to like, and they actually ended up complementing each other.
Absolutely.
Question about a therapist going to therapy. So how do you find a therapist when you're like, okay, you obviously are very knowledgeable. So what do you look for in another therapist that you don't already know yourself?
Yeah. So for me, it was very like, so going and looking for a therapist, then I was like, okay, I wanted a Black woman, definitely. I was like, okay, I want someone, even if they're not a Christian, they like will understand faith, or at least be open to like helping me to explore different things. But I was like, I really want someone who also is like knowledgeable in different ways and stuff. And so I won't lie, the first time like going, it was strange being on the other side, because there were things where it's like, I don't know if I would do that. And I'm like, okay, you got to get out of your therapist brain. Like, you're coming to therapy. Like, it's not for you to be like, oh, would you really have done that? I don't know. And so I think at first it was like weird transitioning out of that, but it did help me to really understand or think more of like, okay, what should people be looking for in a therapist and stuff like that? Because like my number one thing is like, I'm very much like a non-disclosure type of person. When it's your therapy time, it is your therapy time. Like, one of my clients once was like, Dr. Cuckoo, I realized I don't know anything about you. And I was like, yeah. She was like, and I like that. I said, me too. And we laughed and we moved on. And I said, and it is okay, because this is your time. It is not my time. And stuff like that. But it made me think more about like, okay, what is actually helpful for me? And it was interesting, because it was like, I wanted a space where I was going to be able to unpack things, but then actually have someone like question me too. And I will say like that my first therapist, like, she was good at like things. I think also because she was Black, but she wasn't African. And I think like when you start telling a non-African certain things, they're like, you kind of said that as though it's like normal. And so it's like, and you're like, it's not like, and then she really actually helped me to be like, no, girl, that was not normal at all. I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And so there was a piece of that was like helpful, because it made me be like, oh no, I need to tap more into this in that way.
Man, that just made me think about one session that I had very early in my journey, where I had the opposite situation from you, Uche, where I would be sharing things with my therapist, and she would be like, dang, me too. Yeah, girl, because this and this and this and this. And I'm like, wait, am I the one seeking the resources? Or so it's
And I've had
important.
clients and tell me that, like, I do. So when people reach out to me, like, I'll do consultations first. For me, like, that's something also, if you're looking for a therapist, I 1000% say that your therapist needs to do a consultation first. Because one, you need to see, like, am I going to be a fit with them? Are they a fit with me? Like, type of thing. And you want to know kind of like what type of style am I getting into? But I'll have like consultations with people, and I'll go through like my questions. And I'll say like, okay, like, have you been to therapy before? And then they'll let me know like, okay, if they have, and they'll tell me some of their experiences. I'm like, no, that was not okay. That was very strange. Like where, one client was like, yeah, like someone, the therapist knew I was this type of doctor. And then they were asking me about this and this. And I was like, very inappropriate. So yeah. And so for me, it's actually made me more fervent or like more outspoken and like what is a therapy, what is therapy, what a therapist should be like, what are things that if you're experiencing this in your therapy journey that like this is not okay and you might need to like switch therapists too.
Exactly. That was my sure tell sign, like this is not it. So
Mhm.
thank you for that. So Dr. Uche, I know you are pretty much like you're growing as far as like your presence, being featured in New York Times, seeing you do some press runs for the local news channels, and also had a feature episode with our fellow Revolt Creators Network. Hey, patient Dr. Shonda, hey girl. So as you're growing in your journey, but also with your sort of, advocacy for mental health, what's the best ways for you to find balance between like those personal and public sides of the advocacy work that you do?
Travel is my number one. I am somebody that's like, I love what I do. I tell everybody I was never meant to work 40 hours a week though. And so I do not. I am very strict with my time. I'm not built for that. I'm not built for 5 days a week. I like to pour in where I pour in and then I cut off where I cut off. And so for me, that like helps me to have a good balance where it's like, okay, I see clients. I do some, kind of more outreach type of work. I like to do education work. And then I also like to have my own life because it just wouldn't make sense, right? If I don't have a balance for myself, it really wouldn't be a good telltale sign for someone to come to therapy with me, right? Like you don't even have like things together. And so for me, it's been like that balance of like really being mindful of my time, pouring in like completely when I need to pour in, but then also being able to say like, okay, like that was enough. Like, what does that look like for me? And like traveling and like getting to see people, like community is super big for me. And so I like that's 90 times out of 10, like when I'm traveling, I'm like, oh, I want to go spend time with my family or friends, or we're going to go experience something new. But then I also got into like doing solo trips and like really going back to different countries in Africa. Cause like, I'm like, what I realized was like when I would go to other countries, I would just try to find a black people there. And I was like, well, might as well just go to black countries. So you can, do these different things there. And so that's been something that's like been really helpful for me too.
Love that. Hmm.
Yeah. And just thinking more about community too. For you, what role does community play in mental wellness? Because it sounds too like you do, as a therapist, you also seek like support systems, community, and you tap into those like really well. So for someone who's listening, how can they maybe build that stronger support system?
Yeah, I think community is like very like even when we do research, when we look at like, okay, what helps people to sustain some of the progress that they do, a big portion of that is like community wellness. And like, do I have a support system outside of this? Do I have people that I connect to that I tell different things to? And what does that look like? And so for me, when you're like looking for community, I tell people like, one, think about the things that you actually enjoy and like start there, right? So sometimes it's like, you might end up saying like, okay, everyone else is doing this, let me do that. But if you don't like going to brunch, like that's probably not going to be something fun for you, right? Even if your other people want to do it, but like finding things where it's like, I already connect to this, and this would be something I could enjoy by myself, but it would be, enhanced in having a community. But I think also like, kind of rediscovering like what the word community actually means, and what does it look like to be a good community member. I think right now, it's so popular, everybody's talking about community, but then we also talk about like a lot of times boundaries and cut off. And like, we're like, boundaries belong in community. Yes. Like boundaries are your way to keep you in community with people. It's not to keep you outside of community with people. That's when it's more so like you're making rules and you're not really being flexible, or you're not really saying like, what does reconciliation kind of like look like? And so I think like when you're thinking about building community, you want to think about like, okay, what do I want this community to look like? And then what are ways that I've been a good community member? And then what are ways that I've not, like I maybe failed as a community member, right? And thinking about like that community isn't going to always be convenient. There are times where to be a good community member, I have to do something inconvenient to me. But there's times where other people have done things that are inconvenient to them too, right? Where it's like they've shown up for me in different ways or given me different things where I'm like, oh, that probably was a sacrifice, but like it was something that was needed and you saw that I needed it. And so for me, it's like also as you're building community, it's like reviewing what type of member you are.
So just staying like introspective, reflective on how you're showing up in your community. Yeah, that's so important. I think a lot of like a big part of therapy to me is having someone hold up a mirror to you and like pointing out things that maybe you don't realize you're doing. And that's for me, I haven't taken a therapy session or anything, but to Tanina's point earlier, it's definitely been like a priority of mine. Like I want to. Actually not a priority. It's been something I really wanted to do, but I haven't made a priority. Um, and I hear it's a lot like, oh, to find a good therapist, it's kind of like dating. I've just heard like different things. So for someone maybe like me who hasn't taken that first step into therapy or taking a session or any type of like mental health work with a professional, what would be the first step?
Yeah, no, that's good. And I think like one, like it's so normal. Like when we talk about like everyone's like, yeah, therapy's good, but then it's like, ooh, like have I, went to try to get into therapy? And it's hard. Like I do tell people like it's not an easy thing, one, to admit like I probably need therapy and like what does that look like for me? But then going through the process of it, because it can be like dating, it can be like trying to find that perfect pair of jeans where you're like, I put out 5 and I thought 5 were gonna fit and like none of them fit. And like, but you start to know a little bit more about what you need. And so I say like at the very beginning, I think about like, what do I want to get out of therapy? Like being able to actually answer that question for yourself. So you're going in with kind of like a plan of like, what do I want it to look like? So like, am I going in for trauma therapy? Am I going in for some like identity exploration? Am I going in for relationship building or communicating, understanding like, what does it look like to be more less independent or, things like that. So I would say for people like first to say like, okay, what do I want to get out of this? And then what do I feel like I would need? What type of person would I need for that? Right? Do I need a person that's like, okay, extremely kind? Do I need a person, every therapist should be extremely kind. Let's start there. But also like, do I want someone where it's like, oh, I feel like, they are more structured in their approach, right? Or do I want someone where it feels kind of like free, but like, I also think that we're going towards a certain like goal. But then also thinking and knowing, okay, what are things to look for or look in a therapist? And like, you want someone who has like good boundaries. You want someone who is kind. You want someone who doesn't have like harsh language as they're speaking or doesn't do that like tough love type of thing, right? That because there's a way to be direct and also to continue to be loving in that. You want someone who's like not going to make the session about them, that you're like, okay, limited disclosure, this is my time. I'm paying you to help me, type of thing. And so like kind of getting like, okay, what is healthy in a therapist? And then what do I actually want to get out of therapy?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What would you say is your approach to making people feel welcomed and you're not judged when they enter your room and feel like they can be themselves?
Yeah. So like like I said, I do like consultations so they can like clients can get to know a little bit of my field. So I ask them like, what are you coming in for? Kind of telling them about my spiel. So I think it helps people to know like, okay, this is how I see therapy and how I also interact with therapy. But then even in that intake session, like intakes are a bit different because I tell people I'm just going to be getting a whole bunch of information out of you. But I tell people, to be as honest as you can be, because I know that the honesty you're going to give me on my first session is not going to honesty you're going to give me 15 sessions in, right? But I try to leave room for that, where it's okay for you to grow in honesty with me as your therapist, because, you're trying to understand this process. It is weird. Like I'm telling someone my whole life story and they're not telling me theirs. And, it's really just for me. And so I try to set that scene of like, it's okay if you feel nervous, if there's some things where you're like, I'm not ready to give you all that information yet, that's perfectly fine. And then I'm able to, I think in terms of like bringing people in and allowing them to just like be themselves and give them like a loose type of structure. Because that for me is what I've realized for people. They're like, okay, I need a little guidance. But then after that, it allows people to kind of like unfold a little bit easier. So they're able to talk about the different things and, get help in that type of way. But I really just try to also just like be myself in that sense. Like, I'm really like appreciative like of the training that I got. So when I was going through my doctoral program, we had an in-house clinic. And so everything was filmed. And it was like nerve-wracking at first, but it was so helpful in like shaping me too, because that you go after session, like you're having supervision, you watch your tape with your supervisor. And then I had one supervisor, Dr. Jody Newman, to this day, that's my girl. But she really had this stoic face, and she'd be like, pause the video. What were you doing there? I'd be like, because, and then I would have to come up with an answer as to like, what did I do? What have I missed? Like all these different things. And she always used to say this one line to me where she was like, you don't want to be a blank slate, because when you're a blank slate, people fill you in. And so she was very much a person that like silence is powerful, but after the silence, you have to respond well. And so it really kind of like shaped like, okay, I can be silent. Let me utilize this silence, but then let me respond in a way that allows them to like share themselves more, or also allows them to feel my presence and to know like, hey, that was something really heavy that you shared. Like, I do appreciate that. X, Y, and Z. And so for me, like, I always think back to like my being able to like do the work that I do. Like, she was just very integral in that.
Wow. Wait, you dropped a bar about being a blank slate. Can we dive deeper into that?
Yeah, because she would always say that, because especially because I think too, especially when you're in early training, but it's such something that you can apply to your outside life too, is that sometimes you'll like experience something or whatever, or someone says something, and then you're like, okay, I'm being silent and I'm really trying to show like I'm caring for you, but it's like, but you didn't say anything. And so when you don't say anything, and when you are this blank slate, people are going to fill you in with whatever like their own conscious like beliefs or unconscious beliefs, and what they're thinking and saying and all this other stuff. And so you have to be the one that grabs a marker and starts to write, right? Like, so I can give you this slate, and so it's like there's openness here, but then I have to be the one that starts to tell you like, what do I actually write down? Because if I'm just silent all the time, people are going to fill you in every experience and every situation, and that, you know, it's never a place that you want to be in, because then you don't even know that you're fighting this belief that they have about you, because you just never said anything.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely transferable to career, friendships, relationships. Because I know for me, it can be kind of like in certain situations, it can be kind of nerve-wracking to like speak up when you have a thought and you're like, oh, like I need to say this, and then you just don't, and then like people either don't hear it, or like they assume like, oh, she ain't got nothing to contribute to the conversation, so let's just move on, you know? So it's definitely like something that I think people can take away with them as they navigate through life and stuff. So just kind of like wrapping up a little bit, what would you say is one mental health practice that you think everyone should incorporate into their daily lives?
I think taking time for yourself in the morning, whatever that looks like. Like, I think a lot of times we just like start our days and we just like, you know, we keep going, right? You wake up with this like jarring alarm, and then you're like, okay, let me go shower. Okay, let me do, you know, X, Y, and Z. And you're not actually taking the time to slow down, and to say like, okay, like what do I even want this day to look like? What am I feeling right now? What does my body feel like? And so I think for me, you know, for some people, it might be through prayer. For some people, it might be through meditation. It might be through exercise. But I would say like waking up in enough, and which also then leads to like sleep, and why you need to have good sleep and good sleep hygiene. But being able to wake up in enough time so where when you wake up, you don't have to hurry up and run out the door, right? Because when it's like you're already setting yourself back a little bit, where it's just like, I didn't even have the time to set my feet on the ground, right? And so for me, like, I'm a person where my friend says it's a soft lie, but I said, I don't like to wake up with alarms. I like to just like, my body wakes me up, and then I go about my day, and I just feel really calm and collected. But for me, it's really helpful, because I'm like, oh, I get to wake up, and then I get to like lay in bed, and I get to think about like, okay, like, oh, that was a good sleep. And I just kind of like review like, oh, what I feel like here, this and this. But for me, it helps me to like kind of like set the tone for my day, that it doesn't need to be a rush. Like, there's nothing in my life I need to be rushing for. It reminds me of my dad, that like when he sees someone speed, since I was a kid, he'd be like, where are you speeding to? Even if it's a funeral, the person is already dead. Why are you trying to? I would scream.
Oh no.
True.
That he was, and then, but I'm like, I mean, you're right in a sense. Like, you know, me trying to hurt, like, it's not going to change the situation. So, like, might as well take your time, set your feet, and then keep moving.
I feel like all East Coast people need to hear that message because the way they
So,
be rushing in New York. Also, nothing. I'm like, okay, the light just turned green, and I'm already hearing honks. Like, y'all need to calm down. Like, it's not that serious.
Not that serious.
Yeah.
that is so true, especially down here in Atlanta. Atlanta drivers, you guys need some patience and some lessons.
Meditation app. Yeah.
Yeah.
All of it. Yeah. So I think we can get into some of the closing reflections. Anna, you want to take it away?
I'll take it away. It's so interesting because listening to this whole conversation with Dr. Uche, oh my goodness, like I'm just bubbling with like, okay, what's my call to action? What are some next steps? Things I can incorporate into my life today. And I can just imagine our listeners are like, we need to know more about this lady. Where can we find her? We need to sign up and get you some consultations, girl. But wanted to talk about the Talk Naija Therapy Fund because personally, I'm a beneficiary. I don't know if you do that, but I had signed up for a scholarship and received that. And I think it was up 8 sessions, up to $120 covered per session. So it's some real support that y'all offer. So just talk to us about what that is and also how people can find that resource.
Yeah. Also, oh, I didn't even realize that. That makes me so happy. I love when people tell me they received it. But yeah, so it started. When did we start this? Maybe 2021, I think, was our first cohort, or when I had the idea of it, of like, you know what, we talk a lot about like breaking barriers. Finances is a barrier for a lot of people. And so I was just like, okay, I don't know what's gonna happen, but let's do this. And I talked to Chinamso about it, and he was like, yeah, whatever. He's always like, Uche, whatever idea you have, I support. And has always just been such a real one with that, and like living out the vision and keeping that. And so we reached out to people because you know some heavy hitters in the Nigerian community, okay, they like to donate, and so that people just started donating money, and from there we decided, okay, we'll do these cohorts every quarter, offer therapy for people, or offer finances for them to go to therapy, like you said, for 8 sessions, up to $120 per session, and we've just seen so many people just like take advantage of it and email us afterwards and say like, you are the reason I was able to get out of addiction, which was like such a beautiful thing. Like, you guys, because you were able to do this, you were the reason why like I was able to like do some family therapy. And so like just hearing all the stories of like, hey, like I wanted help and I just didn't know how to start or where to get it, and then your fund helped me to get it, has just like been so amazing. Like even when I was in Nigeria, a girl came up to me and was like, oh, you're with Talk Naija, like I had one of the scholarships, and I was like, and so like just like hearing that is always just like so heartwarming, and it comes out of nowhere, and it's like so beautiful to just know people do that. And so like people can also donate. You can donate on talknaija.org also to the fund, but you also sign up through there too to be able to receive funds too. And so honestly, it's just been a blessing like to be able to provide this for people and to have it just kind of like keep coming full circle.
You are doing the Lord's work. Shout out to you.
Yeah.
I love it so much.
Wow. Thank you so much for just everything. Like, you have re-inspired me to just prioritize therapy. I've been talking about it for so long, but I think like just the barriers and like, okay, where do I go to look up where therapists are, and who am I covered by, and how do I find the right one, and finding Black therapists and all these things. Like, I think like even just kind of getting the start and putting one foot in front of the other. I like how you mentioned like as you kind of like do research and just try out therapists, you'll start to know more and more what is more fitting for you. So I just thank you for this conversation. I thank you for the resources and knowledge you've shared. Like, I know that people listening are going to greatly benefit from this conversation. And yeah, thank you for the work that you do. And I also wanted to interject earlier and say that you are walking within your purpose. Even the way that you talk about what you do is very inspiring. And I think I said on another episode, I'm so inspired by people who are where they're supposed to be and kind of like walking in what they're meant to do. So
Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
I just wanted to say too, Aberba is blessed to have us. Shout out to Aberba women one time.
Amen.
So, Dr. Uche, where can our listeners and folks just connect with you to learn more about your work and just to see your journey from here?
Yeah, so you can go on my website, www.drukuku.com. You can also follow me on Instagram at Dr. Ukuku. Also, Talk Naija. You can follow us at talknaija.org on Instagram, and then talknaija.org for our website too. And so those are a couple of things that we are trying to keep current, push out things. Ooh, doing content is hard, y'all. I don't know. God bless you guys. Y'all are doing the Lord's work here. Okay, putting in the work to do it. It is not easy to do things like that, but you can always find us there too.
Absolutely. It really is by faith. But
What
thank you
about
so
the
much.
ADA group? Sorry. How
Yeah.
can people join that?
Yeah, so I'm doing a cohort right now, but I will restart it in August. And so if you go on my website, I also have a tab for the ADDA group, but then also on Instagram too, on my links, you can also sign up for the ADDA group there too. And so in the next coming weeks, I will start reopening consultations for that, and then it'll be for the cohort in the fall.
Beautiful. Thanks, Claire, for that. Wow, what a beautiful way to end mental health, or start or end or celebrate Mental Health Awareness Month. And trust me, the gems are here. Start from the beginning if you need to catch them all again. But thank you again, Dr. Uche. Love, love, love having you. And just, yeah, it's great.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for the work that y'all are doing. I love seeing Aberba women just kill it in all the fields. I think you guys are doing good things that people feel relatable to and see themselves in. So.
I love this sisterhood we got going on. I'm feeling the sister like through the screen. It's just, love it. The love is here.
I love it. All right, y'all. Well, we'll see you on the next one. Have a great one. God bless.